Great. Well, thanks, Terry. I almost feel like we were about to take off when we do that countdown piece. But thanks for inviting me to be here and share information with you. I've shared with Terry. Aside from what I do professionally, I have been a family caregiver, a daughter, and a granddaughter who had to walk this journey. And I really even recognize, even with all my knowledge and all my resources, it is probably one of the hardest decisions when you are involved in elder care to make, and knowing how to navigate it and knowing how to navigate all the different changing landscapes that go with it. So with that being said, I just kind of want to jump in. As Terry said, I do want to encourage you, if something comes to mind and you have a question, type it in your chat box. I don't want us to get away from being able to answer your questions and make sure that we can address everything that's on your mind and that you're thinking about. So, but how do you know when it's time to consider moving your loved one? And what does that look like? So when you start to think about it, we want to think about what are those driving factors? What are the big things that are going to do that? And that's going to include your loved one's changing abilities, caregiver stress, practical day-to-day issues, legal issues, financial issues. So let's talk about each one of those in a little bit more detail. So when we look at your loved one's changing abilities, what's happening with them based on whatever their concerns or issues are. Maybe it's a diagnosis of dementia. Maybe it's they're having mobility issues or Parkinson's disease, or they've got other chronic health conditions that are changing their abilities and their ability to care for themselves. So a couple of questions is, how well are they able to maintain their nutritional status? So either access to meals, preparing meals, getting meals, groceries, those types of things. And overwhelmingly, sometimes it becomes a safety issue for folks with meals. I worked with a family one time, and one of the ways that they really realized they needed to fund care was that his wife actually caught their entire kitchen on fire because she forgot what she was doing. She left something on the stove, and really coming down to that meal preparation piece. So it's both maintaining nutritional status, but also, can we safely prepare meals? Can we safely maintain food and use those things? Also, housekeeping. Sometimes our elders haven't downsized yet. They still have a large house, but even if they have a small apartment, they've downsized. Can they maintain that? Are they able to keep that stuff clean? Is it not an option to bring somebody in to do that? So when we do assessments, we oftentimes look at what we call instrumental activities of daily living. And those are things like housekeeping and basic skills. And so can they vacuum? Can they dust? Can they mop, sweep, take out the garbage, those types of things? And is there support in place to be able to do that for them? So can they do it? Another big question that we see is personal hygiene. Are they needing more assistance with bathing, getting dressed? And that could be a whole host of reasons why that's changing, whether that's because they're having memory issues because of dementia, or whether they're having movement and mobility issues related to another health condition, balance, those types of things. So getting in and out of a tub, has the home been adapted to be able to allow for that? Are they able to maintain that? Are there concerns there? Doing laundry, those types of things. Another really big issue that comes up is medication management, because we know that for folks, oftentimes they're on multiple medications that have to be taken at varying times of the day, and being able to manage that, being able to remember to do those things. And if our medication gets out of whack, oftentimes it can cascade into a whole host of other concerns and difficulties. And we're not managing whatever that chronic condition is where they're needing that. So are they forgetting their medications? Are they getting confused about them? Even if we're sorting them out in a pill planner, or they even have some really cool things that the pharmacy can provide you now, where the box opens at a particular time when it's just the right time to take that medicine, and you can see if someone misses that to do that. But are there concerns with that? I think probably one of the biggest driving factors that we see in changing abilities for folks is confusion and memory loss. So, has there been a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or related dementia? Are they getting more confused? Are they getting disoriented and not being able to remember? I remember my grandmother, she would forget that she had breakfast. And so she would sometimes eat breakfast 4, 5, 6 times a day and be very confused about those types of things. Oftentimes, if confusion is progressing, folks may want to go places or leave or think that they're not in their own home, and they can just get disoriented to time and place. And so, again, it's a safety issue because they may wander out, get lost, and turned around, and that can become a big concern for that. Are they able to handle an emergency response? So a lot of these, if you look at them, really relate to safety and safety concerns, but what is their ability to get out in case of a fire, call 911, those types of things? And is there somebody who can get to them quickly? One of the things that we realized as a family really quickly for my grandmother was that she lived in a farm, lived on a farm in Stamping Ground, Kentucky, and it wasn't easy for any of us to get to her. And it really was a little bit out, even for emergency responders. And so if there was a fall or things like that, that was really a concern for us, being so far away from her. So as you're thinking about what's driving, is it time to look at a different level of care, a different residential status? Look at all these things as your loved one's changing. I think part of what gets hard about this, though, is sometimes there's subtle changes, and it's not until we see something big like a medication mishap or somebody gets lost or we have a fall that we really see, wow, they've really changed and their abilities have really gone down and their ability to care for themselves. Another driving factor that comes into play is caregiver stress. And so if you chose to be on here, it tells me a little bit that maybe you or someone you know is a caregiver, and we know that stress and the strain of doing so can really take its toll on health. And in fact, Terry shared with me right before we started this call that there's new data out that tells us that Kentucky ranks 3rd in caregiver depression, which is so concerning because we want to be able to get resources and those types of things. But a lot of times caregiver stress is taking its toll and causing additional health problems. We actually know research tells us that folks who provide care are more likely to have their own health problems and can themselves end up in the hospital twice as likely as those who do not. And those numbers go up when you are providing care for a person with dementia, because the stress and the demands of that can be greater than in some other caregiving situations. So you want to look as a caregiver, are you getting exhausted? Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you having anxiety, depression, difficulty concentrating? Or is your own health suffering and doing that? And it's not anything to feel guilty about, to be able to take care of yourself. You know, we use the adage all the time. They tell you, put oxygen when you're in a plane, put the oxygen on yourself first, because you have to take care of yourself. And I work with a lot of families, and I always say, what's going to happen if you wear out or you break down and you can't take care of your wife, or you can't take care of your mom? And so really looking at that, because that can really drive those factors and making sure that they've got the care that they need. The other driving factors just comes down to some practical issues. So as we're looking at it, a lot of times we know caregivers don't just have a single responsibility. Oftentimes they're in a sandwich generation. They've got young kids or other people they're providing care for, work, trying to manage a career and a job, and taking care of a loved one. So really managing all of that, and if things really start to fall apart in one area or the other, or you're not able to do all of that, that really can be one of your driving factors on when is it time. Arranging care can be really challenging, daunting, and a little overwhelming. finding somebody to come in and help in the home, whether that's through a private agency, through an private individual. However you're doing that, a lot of times they can be not as dependable as we'd like for them to be. People get sick, life happens. Finding somebody in your area who can do that for you, finding somebody you trust and that you're comfortable with, arranging that care can really get to be overwhelming. The other piece is that there's a whole host of issues that come along with when you provide care in your home that you need to work through to make sure that you yourself are protected. Things like workers' comp, if there's unemployment claims, things like that, particularly if you are hiring somebody who is a private individual and not working through a particular agency that handles those things for you. Another practical issue that comes about when your loved one's got changing abilities is the physical demands of providing care. Sometimes folks need assistance walking, getting up and transferring from a chair to walking, and that becomes very physical. Giving a bath is not easy if that's not something that you have done before, or helping someone in the shower, and the physical demands of being able to do that and provide that. Some of you all might also be dealing with long distance caregiving, trying to manage care, of a loved one who's an hour away or who's across the country. And really, do you have eyes on them? And do you have people that you can trust to go and check in on them and arranging that care? And when you're doing long distance caregiving, all the things we're talking about almost get multiplied, because they get a little bit more challenging just by where you are and your location and distance. So looking at what are your options, is it better to look at residential care where you've got 4 walls and a staff that's always there taking care of your loved one and that you can always check into? We've also touched on safety concerns through a lot of the other driving factors that we talked about, but are there multiple falls? Are folks wandering? Are they getting confused with their medications? Are they eating spoiled or rotten food, or preparing meals in an unsafe way, putting things in the microwave that it can't be in the microwave at risk for fire? Are there little things like that that really drive concern? Unfortunately, in this day and age too, we have to really look at scams and things like that come about. And unfortunately, a lot of our elders are prey to unscrupulous individuals who will come and say, I'll steal your driveway if you pay me $1,000 in cash. And I've met family after family after family where their loved ones have been taken advantage of because they were they had memory issues. They were unable to discern that it was a concern. And so there's a big safety issue that gets associated with that. So you want to look at, are they making good decisions? Are they making good judgment? And are they at risk for being exploited in any way, shape, or form? So those are kind of those practical issues as we look at it. I want to talk about the other driving factors, which is the financial and the legal issues. And this sometimes isn't necessarily as much of a driving factor, but it is going to be a determinant in the decisions that you ultimately make. So the first part I want to make sure we talk about is the legal issues, and making sure that you or the caregiver has the legal authority to make the decisions for your loved one. Whenever we have somebody move in, if they are unable to sign for themselves, we require a copy of their documents where they have given that power, and that those documents have to be pretty explicit in regards that they can arrange care, that they can sign for you to a lease, or sign for you to be in a residential health facility, those types of things. So you want to take a look at your documents. You want to make sure that you work through an attorney who is knowledgeable in the area, but that you have the right decision-making ability to do so. Unfortunately, I still see sometimes families that this is one of those things, it's a hard conversation to bring up. And so we put it off and we put it off and we put it off till we get to a crisis point and we need it and we don't have it. And then it gets harder to get that, because then you're looking at things like going through guardianship or having to just be at the mercy of what the process is going to be. So really having some of those conversations early and deciding who has that legal ability to make the decision. But I also recognize that just because you have the legal ability to make the decision doesn't necessarily mean that you are the sole decision maker. And oftentimes we work as families and we have discussions about when is the right time. And one of the things that we see is there can be really varying points of view from different family members about when is it time. And some folks will say, well, I don't think they're ready for that. And so you may have a debate or just a genuine disagreement about that level of care. If that's the case, I would really encourage you to take this PowerPoint, take some of the things and ask the questions that I've gone through on these driving factors, on like the changing abilities, where the caregiver stress and difficult points are, and all these practical issues. And that can help remove the emotions from the decision-making process, and help you do that. So even if you are the legal decision maker, but you find yourself needing and wanting to have input from family members, that'll help guide that and make that decision just a little bit easier as you're processing through. The other piece that oftentimes comes up when you're thinking about when is the right time and what is the right level of care, is paying for that care, the financial issues. Sometimes you come into a caregiving situation and you don't know anything about the finances. It'll be important for you, if you are that decision maker, to get information on exactly what those finances are and what they have and they're available. I always like to take a minute to make sure I go over the different options, because I think there's still some confusion, and some of you all may already know this, but it can be confusing because we know that for our elders, many of them have Medicare, some may have Medicaid, and some may have some supplemental insurance. People get Medicare and Medicaid mixed up a lot. Medicare is the insurance program for folks who are over the age of 65, disabled, and it's health insurance. Medicaid is health insurance for folks who don't have resources and are in need economically. And so you can have both Medicaid and Medicare. You can also just have Medicare if you don't have an economic need for additional assistance. Many folks oftentimes think that Medicare will pay for levels of care for elder care. And unfortunately, the harsh reality is not at this time. So when you read information about Medicare, it'll say it covers skilled nursing care, and that is correct. It will pay up to 100 days of skilled nursing care a year. But there's a couple caveats to that. If you just decide that they need to move into a nursing home or long-term care, they're not going to pay just for that. What you're going to see is that in order for Medicare to pay, you have to have what's called a qualifying health hospital stay, which has to be 3 days. And that was waived during the pandemic. And as of tomorrow, when the health emergency ends, that waiver ends. And so now you'll have to have 3 days in a hospital before Medicare will even consider paying for skilled nursing care. The other thing is it's up to 100 days, but not all. There's co-pays that are associated with that. So the first 21 days are covered, and then after that, it goes to usually an 80-20 split. But the other piece of it is that a lot of people don't use all 100 days, because in order to continue for Medicare to be paying, then you have to be progressing and getting better. So Medicare oftentimes pays for people to go into skilled nursing to rehab after a hip replacement, knee replacement, major fall, those types of things. But the idea is that they're getting better and they're progressing with each phase. If they plateau and you don't see much progression, then Medicare will stop paying at that point. And then you're looking at either paying for it privately, or if you have Medicaid, you may get access for that. Unfortunately, so that's Medicare and what it pays for. If you look at Medicaid, and if you have someone who is eligible for Medicaid, in Kentucky right now, the only level of care that is provided by Medicaid, that's paid for by Medicaid, is skilled nursing. So assisted living is not covered under Medicaid. and personal care is not covered under Medicaid. So when we're thinking about how we're paying for care, you have to take a look at what our resources are and what payment sources are accepted for that. So if you're thinking about what to do and where to go, I just wanted to run down all the different levels of care. I think oftentimes we think about it's either home or it's nursing home. And there's so many options and availability out there. So, first off is to really try to keep people in their own home. You can use home care options. That can include having someone who comes in and just helps with housekeeping or meals and daily services, all the way up to having nursing care coming in and providing care through a home health agency. Medicaid will pay for some of these home care services through a program called the Home and Community-Based Services Waiver. So that is an option. They'll provide some custodial care and some personal care, so helping people get dressed and ready for the day, and their grooming and those types of things. One of the things I think a lot of people don't realize is out there is adult day. We operate 2 adult day centers within our organization. One of them is the Best Friends Day Center and I always say Lexington, but in Brandon Crossing, it feels like Lexington to me. But it's a really cost-effective option for folks that are not ready for residential care, but maybe want to work, or they just need a break during the day, or just need a little bit of help, or need help managing medical conditions. Adult day centers are in Kentucky are medical, and they're all medical model. So they have a nurse on site who can help manage medications, help communicate with the physician for you, those types of things. And so it can be a really great thing, as well as oftentimes your loved one or the elder can really get socialization, some activities, sometimes physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy are provided through the adult days. So there's really a good way to kind of supplement care that you are providing at home informally, or even you can combine home care and adult day to really create a caregiving environment before you need residential care. The other option is some folks offer respite care, which is just a short-term stay in a level of care. So if you are a family member who's providing care and you want to take a vacation, or maybe you have to have a medical procedure and you're going to be out of commission for a little while, you can work with many of the care providers to do a respite care stay. A lot of them will have minimum stays, but oftentimes you can negotiate that. So usually it's 7 or 14 days, but you can do, I know for us, we do respite stays up to 3 months. So one of the things that that we have is we have an elder who lives with us during the winter months while her daughter snowbirds in Florida. And so it's a respite stay and she's not there all the time. But it works out perfectly. So there's a lot of unique ways that you can look at doing that and just provide that little break without it being a permanent move. And then the next step is to look at residential care. So in Kentucky, we have 3 levels of care. And for those of you who have maybe loved ones in different states, I'll encourage you that you'll usually there will find that you don't have the personal care level. Most other states have assisted living, and then they have what's called skilled nursing care. But in Kentucky, we have 3 different levels of care. There's some new regulations on the books in regards to assisted living. They can get complicated even for the providers. But the most important question that I usually will tell families that you need to ask is the big difference between the 2 is going to be whether or not there is a nurse on site or not. Right now in Kentucky in assisted living, there's no nursing services provided. There are no nurses in assisted living. So if your loved one needs medication management, health observation, medical observation, things like that, you're going to want to choose the personal care level because they're going to have that nurse on site. If your loved one does okay and they can do it, if with general medication reminders, and they just need basic assistance with their activities of daily living, which is bathing, grooming, dressing, then assisted living might be the best option for you. So you really have to kind of take a look at what that option is. Under assisted living, the big issue that I see, and we, in our campuses, we actually operate all 3 levels of care, comes down to medications. Because if somebody, even with reminders, has trouble, or they need things like insulin injections or eye drops, that all has to be done by a licensed nurse. And so you're going to need a higher level of care than what assisted living is providing. So as you begin thinking about it, and as you're asking questions, those are kind of the differentiators for there. Do you need a nurse or not? So residential care, when you look at it, it's 3 levels: assisted living all the way up to skilled nursing care. That just determines the higher level of care that you need. Most people who live in assisted living still remain fairly independent. They just need basic help with activities of daily living. And one of the benefits of the first part is meals, because in your assisted living, all 3 meals are provided. And so you don't have to worry about that piece, and your housekeeping. So you find folks that are fairly independent, but need help with that. The other thing that I see with assisted living is the safety piece of it. A lot of families are comforted by the fact that there is staff awake 24 hours a day and available to respond to any concerns or emergencies. And so sometimes that's the difference between living independently and coming to assisted living. Personal care in the state of Kentucky just adds a nurse onto the things we just discussed. And so now the nurse is going to be able to provide medication management. They're going to be a direct line to the physician. They're going to be able to take orders from that physician, get new medicines, make medication adjustments as needed. They'll also be able to do health observations and those types of things. One of the things I've seen that makes a big difference is we've had folks who are very, very brittle diabetics. And the difference is that they need a nurse really to monitor those blood sugars, monitor their sliding scale insulin, so they can manage that better. And so that's when assisted living is no longer really a good option for them, and they move into the personal care. And then skilled nursing care is what we think about when we think about traditional nursing home. That's most folks there need fairly significant assistance with all of their activities of daily living. They may also need help with eating and being fed. But the other piece is they may have a very significant medical condition that really requires ongoing skilled nursing care. That could be wound care. That could be needing some ongoing physical and occupational therapy that is continual, and IV antibiotics. All of those things you'll see are provided through skilled nursing care and long-term care. So as you're thinking about it and going to make the decision and looking at everything, I really, really encourage you to shop around, visit places, call to do a tour, and the best places should let you come anytime that is convenient for you. That means, they're open and willing for you to be there at any time, which tells you that they feel good about their care all the way around. If you want to shop around and visit and they're like, well, we only do tours during these hours, that would be a red flag for me, and a concern. So be willing to shop around, pop in. You don't always have to make an appointment. You should be able to walk in the door, and it's going to really tell you what kind of care is there as you're shopping around. We have people walk in all of the time, and our staff is always responsive to give tours, answer questions, provide information, that kind of stuff. As you're shopping around and as you're meeting with the teams that are in these residential facilities, ask questions. What kind of activities do they do? Is it something that your loved one would like? Think about what your loved one enjoys. Are they a very active person, or do they not need a really, really active lifestyle? Because you want to be able to match that. I always use my mom and my grandmother are two perfect examples of polar opposites in this. My grandmother really was kind of an introvert. She wasn't a group person. She was really, really happy if she could sew and read and just kind of spend the day looking out the window solo. So she didn't need a high activity place. My mom, on the other hand, was a social butterfly. Loved to be around people, always looking for things to do, those types of things. She needed someplace that was going to keep her engaged, keep her active, and had lots of group opportunities. So think about your loved one when you're asking those questions as to what would match. And the other piece is that how well do they tailor activities to their individual residents? You know, are they willing to take folks fishing that have loved to fish? Do they design activities around the individual interests of the residents? Because then you know that your loved one's going to get that personalized care. More and more people are asking the question around staff training, and I think that that is very, very important. You should always ask, what kind of training do you provide your staff? I find this to be incredibly important when you're working in the field of dementia, is to ask, what level of training does your staff have on dementia? What's your approach? Those types of things, because you want to make sure that the staff has received specialized training in the area so that they can provide the best level of care and the best care for your loved one. The questions you want to ask around cost is what is included. Unfortunately, still oftentimes there's some hidden costs, so you want to ask specifically what's included. There are different varying fee structures when you look at residential facilities. Some folks will have a base cost, and then they will do an a la carte type service where this is your cost, which kind of ultimately translates to room and board. But if they need help with bathing, it's going to be this much per month. If they need incontinence care, it'll be an additional this much per month. If they need escort to and from the dining room, it'll be this much per month. So it's an a la carte. So I always encourage you, because those places, their base rate is what they're going to lead with, which may seem considerably lower than another one who has an all-inclusive model. So just know the different models and find out what all is included and pick out what's best for you and what makes the most sense. You know, the a la carte model may work well for you if your loved one doesn't have a lot of additional needs, but you're really looking for a residential placement where they've got, you know, their room and their meals and those types of things. If your loved one has dementia and their needs are changing, you may want to look at what that looks like, because the a la carte can add up quickly if their needs change. So, and then go back before you make your final decision and ask if you can visit sometime when they're having an activity or an event. It'll show you the life that's lived in that residential place. And so you want to see what's the culture like, what's life like there, what's the lifestyle going to be for my loved one as I'm thinking about that and moving through that. So once you've made the decision on where you go, the next big step is making the transition. And this is something that I work through with families all of the time. How do we do it? What's going to happen? We need to go into it with kind of eyes wide open to know your loved one's likely going to experience some anxiety. There's a sense of loss. Sometimes I always think about one of my elders that lived with us at the Homeplace at Midway, and you know, she gave up her home of 60 years, and she did it on her own. She made the decision. It was 100% her, and she needed to. But you know, when she first moved in, she had such a sense of loss and transition. It's just like any one of the rest of us would be when we leave behind a time or a part of our life. So recognize that and help folks work through that. Some things we did for her was that she had beautiful flowers, and gardening was her favorite thing. And so she brought and shared a lot of her potted plants, and actually we let her plant one of her rose bushes right outside her window. just to help with that sense of loss and maintain a little bit of the connection of the things that she loved. The other thing is that if your loved one has some dementia, you're going to see some increased confusion in the beginning when they're making that transition. That's expected. We watch for it all the time. It will level out, but it's disorienting. And, I kind of liken it to if any one of us has ever moved to a new place, you're kind of discombobulated for a few days. With folks who have dementia, it's just a little harder to recover from that. So they may be more confused. It may look like they have declined. It will level off. It does take a few weeks for that to happen. But it's one of those things that you can anticipate happening as they do that. They might, one of the things your loved one might find is new friends and new activities. Oftentimes I'll have family members tell me, Mom never would have done that before, but now she's taking an art class or she's participating in this music program. And so you really see folks blossom when they can get around socialization and meeting and making new friends. And I think one of the things you'll see is improved health, particularly if you really are making the decision because you're seeing a decline. Hopefully what you'll see once you've made that residential move is that they're going to stabilize and they're going to get healthier. And they may even gain weight because now they're getting routine, good meals that they're enjoying, those types of things. So you'll see that improved health as that comes along. But the transition isn't always easy. How you talk about it and how you work through it with your loved one is really individual. And so coming up with a plan of what's going to work best and what that conversation around that is, and knowing just that's a process. I also think it's important for us to acknowledge that you as a caregiver may experience some things as you make the transition. There's going to be a whole lot of anxiety. You are turning over care of someone that you love deeply and putting them in the hands of someone else. And that comes with a whole lot of anxiety. We recognize that oftentimes, and I really try to reassure our family members, I may not do it exactly. I'm not you. I may not do it exactly the way you did it, but we will love them. But there'll be some general anxiety. Be open and look to be able to say, can I call and check in? Can I see how things are going? And a place should be willing to let you do that as you work through that initial transition. There's grief that goes along with this. It's hard to think about moving your loved one. I oftentimes think about, I use my own example as my mother. So, when we moved her into long-term care, my dad no longer, slept in the same bed with his partner of 48 years, didn't have dinner across the table, those types of things. Family outings are different. Family holidays are different. And so really recognizing that there's a change and there's a grief and there's a sense of loss on your part when you make that change. Oftentimes folks feel very guilty when they make this decision. We sometimes take us right up against the wall and to see if we can do it. And we feel guilty when we need to reach out for help. I think the important thing to realize is that most of us can't do it alone. It takes a whole lot of resources to provide care for someone else. And sometimes you actually are a better caregiver when you allow and invite other folks into that circle and you use residential care. Oftentimes you can have better interactions with your loved one because you're not as burdened with the care and the demands and the needs. And it doesn't mean you have to stop being involved in their care. It doesn't mean you can't come in and help. We had a gentleman who came every night in the evening, and he sat with his wife and they watched TV and had a bowl of ice cream, which was their tradition at home before she moved in with us. And then he helped the staff get her into her nightgown and put her to bed and kiss her goodnight And for the 3 years that she lived with us, I don't think he missed a night doing that. But he still got to do that, and that helped him with his transition, his grief, and not feeling so guilty because he still wanted to provide care for her. The other thing is you may surprisingly find that you have a new support system. The professionals who work in residential long-term care and home care really know how to navigate the system, can really help you with some of this anxiety, the grief, the concerns, but also helping you network with resources that you need. Most places have a social worker who is there, who can help you and support you in the process. But you also may find that you find a new support system through fellow caregivers, fellow family members who also have loved ones living there. And it really creates a new sense of community that comes along with that. So as I wrap up our time, and then I'll open it up for questions, I just want to go over what some additional resources are. If you are navigating this, if you are facing and scratching your head, and I'm thinking something maybe drove you to sign on to today, there's stuff out there to really, really help you. There's support groups, and I know support groups aren't for everybody, but they can be really helpful as you're going through it, because you will talk with other people who have walked the same walk and the same journey ahead of you, and you may learn some lessons. Your journey won't be exactly the same, but you will get an opportunity to just hear and find out what folks went through. Now there's really good options. I remember when I first got in this field, support groups, you had to go and meet whenever they met. Now there's really good options for online support groups and even chat support groups that can be accessed so that you really can make it fit your life, your schedule. Geriatric care managers are professionals who their sole job is to really help families navigate this whole process, from lining up care to finding resources to making sure all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and legally and those types of things. So really, if you don't even know where to start, that's a good place to do it. Geriatric care managers can be a lifesaver if you are a long distance caregiver, because they oftentimes are the ones on site. They're the ones you can call when there's a concern or an issue, and they'll help you navigate it all. If you are in need of legal and financial assistance, I really encourage you to find an attorney that specializes in elder law. Oftentimes, and that's not necessarily an estate attorney who can draft up a will. Elder law attorneys really are well versed in the issues that come about through decision making and making sure they do all of the estate planning, but they also help with some of the more complicated issues, like making sure you have your healthcare surrogate, your durable power of attorney, or if you have to go the route of guardianship. So look at that and make sure you find an attorney that specializes in that, and then that way you'll make sure it's all done. When you do enter into residential care, you should see posters up that advertise about the nursing home ombudsman. A lot of folks don't realize that is not someone who works for the facility. They actually are part of our system, that they're advocates. So they are outside individuals who are advocates for residents in long-term care. So if there's a concern, question, or an issue, they are the ones that can help you navigate that. They can help you in communicating with the staff and really can be that advocate, because that's their whole role as being an outside advocate. The Alzheimer's Association is an excellent resource for referrals to care, support groups, as well as they have a 24-hour helpline that you can talk to a licensed clinical social worker about any concerns that you have or questions, or if you're just having a difficult time and feeling that caregiver stress. And then obviously you guys are tied into UK Elder Care, which is an awesome resource through their webinars and all of the services that they provide. But I think it's a wonderful service to have for you guys, and let you know that you're not alone, and that there are folks who have done this and know how to navigate it and can give you resources and answers. So know that there's stuff out there, there's information out there, there's a whole lot of stuff out there on the web. I always like to kind of go to our tried and true sources, and UK Elder Care and the Alzheimer's Association would be my top two that I would reach out to in regards to making sure we're finding the right information and getting pointed in the right direction. So with that being said, I covered a lot of stuff, so I will open it up to see if there are any questions or issues that anybody wants to bring to the table.